But what we recognized is not everyone's fortunate enough to be able to afford that couple $1,000 trip to New York City or to London to see Wimbledon. A, travel is super expensive, but then B, the ticket prices for some of these events are just crazy now. And, for good reason. It's a really high level product, a really amazing experience. But where we sort of saw the opportunity was in that white space of, hey, let's bring professional men's tennis and tennis at its highest level back to Michigan.
Welcome to Event Explorer, the podcast where we go behind the scenes of the world's most iconic celebrations, festivals, and cultural experiences, and meet the people who bring them to life. I'm your host, Daniel Roth, a creative director, event producer, and lifelong fan of how great events shape the places we live. Each week, we visit a different corner of the events world, from massive music festivals to community rituals to unexpected pockets of sport and culture. If you love great storytelling, behind-the-scenes insights, and the people who make big things happen, this is the show for you. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts and visit eventexp.org to stream more episodes, sign up for updates, and send us your suggestions for events we should cover. Now, today's story is something special. We're heading to Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, where a new tradition is quickly taking hold, the Cranbrook Tennis Classic. It's an ATP Challenger Tour event, a high-level international tennis tournament, and it's hosted on the stunning campus of Cranbrook Schools. This is an international high-stakes event, but it's also a homegrown effort, a nonprofit venture, a fast-growing summer sports tradition built from scratch by Alex Demuth and his family, together with a team of volunteers. From recruiting global players and managing hospitality to building partnerships and giving back to Detroit youth through Tennis Forward, this episode is a blueprint for how to start something big and do it right. All right, let's get into it. Okay, welcome back. Today we are joined by Alex Demuth, the driving force behind one of Michigan's newest and most exciting sports traditions, the Cranbrook Tennis Classic. Held on the beautiful grounds of the Cranbrook Schools in Bloomfield Hills, this is an ATP Challenger event, and it has quickly grown from a bold idea into a summer staple, bringing together international talent, community spirit, and high-level tennis. And it's all in service of investing in the next generation of tennis through Tennis Forward and a relationship with the Palmer Park Tennis Academy. So doing great work. Alex, welcome to Event Explorer. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. You did your homework. Most people I talk to don't know that much about the event, but yeah, no, it's as you know, we just had it last week, our third year. And yeah, so I function as the tournament director and, in addition to that, the marketing director, the operations director, the volunteer director, the something I'm director of something I'm forgetting about. But yeah, it's been a really cool journey from, that moment we started to explore it and to today where it's funny, last night I was driving through my neighborhood in Royal Oak, Michigan, and I drove by a couple wearing they were both wearing CTC Cranbrook Tennis Classic hats. So little moments like that make it really worthwhile and fuel me for the next 12 months.
And these are people that you don't know them?
I did not know them. It's funny. I'm all over the place, as you may have seen as you were there. I'm all over the place at the event. So I ended up seeing and meeting a lot of people, but I had not met these folks, and they seemed like a really lovely couple with super cool hats.
Nice. Now they have a personal connection, and they'll be back next year. And I'm sure Cranbrook Tennis Classic will be back again next year. Yeah, you're just wrapping up this year. I was fortunate to be able to come. I'm a big tennis fan. I picked it up now in my 40s and love playing, and I've watched other smaller matches. But this is really my first exposure to professional tennis, seeing players from all over the world come in. And I think that's such an asset to the area. And we didn't really have that before, right? There wasn't
Right.
an international tennis event in the Detroit area, as far as I knew. Is there history at all with the area and high-level tennis matches?
Yeah, so, back in the 80s, I think there was maybe 1 or 2 years, I think it was the Little Caesars Tennis Championship that they did it at Cobo Hall. I think it was 1983, because when we started doing this in 2023, it had marked, yeah, 40 years since any men's professional tennis had been in Michigan. There's different levels to the professional tennis world. There's the ITF Tour, which is more so it's a little bit more of a smaller tour, guys ranked maybe like from like the 400s all the way to 2000s in the world. So there's been a couple of iterations of that on the men's side. I actually ran one of those tournaments. They're called futures events. I ran one last fall at the University of Michigan. Michigan State does one or two every year. But then on the women's side, there's actually a really substantial and a really long-standing WTA 125 event held at the Public Tennis Center in Midland, and it's it's supported by Dow Chemical. So that's a really long-standing tradition up there. But as far as Southeast Michigan goes, and for the greater state of Michigan, there wasn't very much men's tennis at the highest levels, and I think exposure to professional tennis was sort of the genesis of the event and like sort of the idea that we had at the beginning. We recognize that so in the professional tennis world, again, there's obviously the US Open, the Grand Slams, there's the ATP tour level events. So there was just a tournament in Washington, DC last week. There's these tournaments all over the world every week and it happens to be a very big one and a very really great tournament in Cincinnati as well every year called the Cincinnati Open. It's been around for probably 120 years now. But what we recognize is not everyone's fortunate enough to be able to afford that couple $1,000 trip to New York City or to London to see Wimbledon. A, travel is super expensive, but then B, the ticket prices for some of these events are just crazy now. And, for good reason. It's a really high level product, a really amazing experience. But where we sort of saw the opportunity was in that white space of, hey, let's bring professional men's tennis and tennis at its highest level back to Michigan. And that's sort of where we started and how we started building it.
Awesome. Awesome. So you mentioned these different levels of tournaments. There's the futures event. I imagine that may be a younger class or a kind of people on their way up. Yours is ATP Challenger event. And then there's kind of the ATP, the Wimbledon level and things like that. But explain to me a little bit about just from an events perspective or the tournament level and touring perspective, like how does a career as a tennis professional kind of look at these different stages?
Yeah, so the way the easiest way to explain it, and especially if you're privy to American sports, I guess, even soccer or football in England and Europe,
Mhm.
so the Challenger Tour could be viewed as AAA baseball, AHL hockey, in Italy, Series B soccer, in England, I can't remember the champions or the League One, whatever it is, the league down, the step down from the Premier League. But, in theory, it's funny, another tournament director from one of the tournaments in Canada, the Challenger events in Canada of all places, was explaining it to me. And, so we're attracting our player set. They're usually around like 90 to 300 in the world, ranking wise. And when you think about it, you start to look at the lineups of, NBA teams, NFL teams. There's thousands of guys on these rosters. But what he said to me is like, hey, look at an NHL team. There's 4 lines of forwards and 3 lines of defensemen, 5 guys on the ice at all times, plus the goalie. And what we're attracting is, those middle of the tier sort of second line guys, really great second line players. And so, I hate saying like, yeah, it's like AAA baseball, but that's the easiest sort of analog in the
Sure.
sports world because in theory, in reality, the Challenger Tour is where guys are grinding to get to the Wimbledon, to get to the US Opens. But what's cool is a lot of our players, they actually end up playing that. A guy we had Chris Eubanks this year. He had just made the Wimbledon quarterfinals a year or two ago. Hyun Chung lost in the first round of our tournament, but was a semifinalist at the Australian Open a few years ago. So lots of really cool, guys who are trying to get back into their groove and get back to that top level, that upper echelon of tennis. But also guys like young guys like who we saw in our final, Mark Lahal versus Andres Martin, 2 guys who are young and trying to crack that top 100, trying to get into the Grand Slams and trying to really cement themselves at the top of the tennis world.
Amazing. It is serving the audience is almost ancillary to this. We're just excited to see it. These guys are putting in the work, but it is a show. You're putting on a bit. It's a lot of entertainment. I had a great time. I was there. It's a hot day. You had like a great service, kind of hospitality level things. When you were starting out, was it always were you always kind of looking at Cranbrook for this location, or how did you find that was like the best location to host this?
Yeah, so Cranbrook, really amazing campus educational community. So, not just a K through 12 school, it's a boarding school, it's a MFA program, there's the art museum, the science museum. And a few years ago, they also happened to invest a lot of money into their tennis complex as well, which you were a witness of. Really beautiful venue for tennis. And part of the thinking behind that was, hey, maybe someday we can host a professional level event because we have the courts now at Cranbrook, and we have the sort of infrastructure there to be able to host an event. We have locker rooms, we have a gym, there's space for player dining, player lounges, all these different, like I said, it's a huge 250-acre educational community, so there's lots of buildings, of course, so the infrastructure was there. So from the start, it was always going to be at Cranbrook, whether they said yes or no to our crazy idea of holding a high level professional tennis tournament was up to them. And the way it's turned out is they've been the Cranbrook Kingswood community have been really amazing partners in building this event, and they sort of fill the gaps of where things like we don't know how many generators we need to get, or we don't know who to call when we need the restroom trailer. Like they have their event staff there. We tap into them and partner with them to sort of fill those gaps that, hey, we know how to attract really high level players, we know how to we know how to market the event, we know how to get the word out there. But the Cranbrook team has been, like I said, really helpful in partnering there and making a really first class event and one of the top rated events on the tour as well.
That must have eased the burden of starting such a big effort. Obviously, location is such an important integral part of it, but then there's the players. I want to learn about two things. I want to learn about how you attracted players, and then as well the sponsors or who's the community that's looking into it. But first of all, this year we saw people. There was a huge contingent from Taiwan that came out. Amazing players, just badasses on the court that we saw, doubles and singles players. There were the winner of the tournaments, an Estonian player. These you have to both create a product that's enticing to these players, and then you have to just manage people flights coming in from all over the world with all these different players and languages and everything. To first year, how did you put the word out? How did you attract these players? How did you make this something that they had to come to?
So fortunately, the ATP Tour, they offer a series of tournaments every week for these players to play, and we just so happened to get a really good date on the calendar. The first 2 years of the event, we always coincided with the first week of Wimbledon. So basically, all the guys who would lose in qualifying at Wimbledon the week before, theoretically, they could come to our tournament to play the next week if they didn't want to hang around London without getting a paycheck. Right. So the time of the event that the ATP gave us, and the USTA as well, the USTA is the governing body of tennis in America, and also a really amazing partner in helping us create the event, and sort of they've helped guide us in a sense. So, like I said, the timing was there, so the tournament was there. Whether it was gonna be a good tournament, a bad tournament, the players had no idea, and I honestly had no idea either. So, a lot of players, they sort of took a risk, or they saw, "Hey, it could be a good tournament for me to play. It's on hard courts, it's in America right before, like, the big American hard court swing starts that leads up to the US Open." So, like I said, the timing, the location, made it an attractive event from the start. But then what has really set us apart is the hospitality and the experience that we've created for the players. So what we've been able to do, and we've been rated as high as the third best challenger in the world. Our first year of the event, 2023, we were the third best challenger in the world. There's 220 of these events around the world in places like Lake Como, Saint Tropez, beautiful, lovely, lovely places. But what we've done is we've invested in the player's experience, and what that comes down to is the food and the hotel. So we get them really good food. We work with a really amazing catering company that actually the US Open uses for all of their catering for the players. And then we work with a really nice hotel to house all the players for the, week and a half that they're in town. So, what we've really found is, focusing on those two things really works for us. And, of course, we give them a nice gift. We always give them a cool custom hoodie that players always really appreciate, little things like that. But From the start, like I said, it's funny, we invested a lot in the player experience, and my father and I run the tournament with my father. I can't remember if I mentioned that. So we've had the good fortune of being around professional tennis at the really high levels and sort of like the back end of it as well. So like, behind the scenes in the players' lounges, in the locker rooms, helping coach players or sort of just being around players as friends and people in tennis industry as well. So we only knew what we knew, right? And we knew what the experience was like at the US Open, at the French Open, at the Australian Open. So we were sort of like, okay, well, I guess we can do that. And so, like I said, investing in the player experience has really made it a huge success with them. And now, as we keep growing, we're trying to invest in, the volunteer experience is a really big deal for us as well. We're trying to keep attracting really high level and really committed volunteers as well who you'd never really realize it, but those are the folks who really make the tournament run and sort of give us the ability to go out and recruit new sponsors, talk to new players and help them like try and pull in better players, get a TV network deal, a media deal for us. So and then things like the fan experience as well are gonna be areas that we're gonna be looking at, but, from day 1, I will admit we had some semblance of an idea of what to do. The ATP Challenger Tour, they have a 80-page rule book that we read front to back, and a lot of people will ask me, it's like, "Well, how did you do so well the first year?" It's like and I always tell people, "We read the rule book, right?" We read the rule book, we read the guidelines, and we stuck to them because we didn't know any better. And what you'll see is a lot of the tournaments around the world, especially at this level, they're trying to make a quick buck. And what we're doing is, we're set up as a 501(c)(3). We're trying to give back to the community. We don't make any money off of this. It's out of passion. It's out of love for the game. It's out of love for the community. And so by investing in the player experience, in the fan experience, in the volunteer experience, we've been able to really create, like you said, something that's turning into a bit of a tradition in the
Mhm.
Detroit sporting community.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about that, about those partners, Tennis Forward and the Palmer Park folks. Did that was that just a natural fit from the beginning? Is that something that you set out to make sure that it involved from day one?
Yeah, so we had previously been connected, my family and myself. I coached at Palmer Park for a long time, and Palmer Park Tennis Academy is a really, really lovely and a really amazing and inspiring community tennis program. Obviously, in Palmer Park, which is a neighborhood in Detroit, and a really nice park, right off Woodward there between I think 7 and 8 mile, 6 and 7 mile. I can't remember exactly where. But and it's run by a woman named Leonora King, who I think back in the 2010s started this tennis academy, and she started the tennis academy when the Palmer Park tennis courts, there were cracks everywhere, there were weeds growing through those cracks. It looked like what, a normal person or maybe not a normal person, it looked like what a person not from Detroit would expect a Detroit tennis court to look like,
Sure.
if you know what I mean. But what she was able to do, she was able to start attracting people to come play, kids to come play, and then she was able to get the support of I believe, the Wilson Foundation to redo those courts, and since then, she's been able to turn it into a real tennis academy that's starting to churn out kids who are quite good tennis players and could be on a track to go play college tennis and things like that. So we had previously been working with her. I think she's the aunt of one of my good friends who coached me and coaches all my little brothers in tennis. So we had met her, we had been a part of the academy in some different ways. Myself coaching, my father sort of advising them on how to grow and whatnot. And so when we started this, we wanted to, make tennis forward, which is the 501(c)(3) that operates the Cranbrook Tennis Classic. And so my father and I are the two members of that charity. Plus, I think my stepmom is technically on it. But so it's us, and from the start, we knew this wasn't going to be something we were going to try and make money off of. Like I said, it's about the community, and we wanted to have an angle, and we wanted to have a direct beneficiary of this because we've been so inspired by the Palmer Park Tennis Academy, and specifically the founder and the director of it, Coach Lee, who's a really amazing and a really amazing person.
Amazing. So it's people like her and you guys that Detroit wasn't a name in tennis. Hey, there is a route to schools like U of M, Michigan, smaller schools in the state that do have programs, and they were probably looking not into the city of Detroit particularly, but maybe even outside of Michigan for their player pool. So I think it just shows that these investments of time and heart are really do make a difference in the lives of improving lives or giving people the shot to play at such a high level. Like you can just imagine, even if you spent a couple years going on a challenger tour, or maybe playing a couple of the highest level events, even at qualifying,
Mhm.
the impact that would have on a young person's life to understand how the world works, the connections you'd make over international borders, like you're saying, these are you've got friends now all over the world through tennis. The impact that's amazing.
We attract players from literally all over the world. Our champions from Estonia. We had a bunch of guys from Taiwan, China, Japan, all over Europe, South America. But some of these players, they may be a little bit newer to the Challenger Tour, or they may have been playing sort of the pro circuits in the Asian region. So they're not necessarily like super exposed to different cultures just yet.
Yeah, I think that's really remarkable. People from smaller countries or something, tennis can be made in. These guys are almost celebrities from their. They are celebrities from their countries or their regions, and they're showing up. Tennis is a cool sport that you're showing up with a bag of rackets and some balls and some shorts and a t-shirt, and you can go out and impress hundreds, thousands of people and make your living with your skill and your acumen and your athleticism versus having to show up with an F1 car and
Yeah.
engineering and parts and trailers and all this stuff. It's really cool. And I think a lot of people connect with that, that it's almost gladiators duking it out with the raw
Absolutely.
talent
Yeah.
on the court. Being able to see that in person, you watch it on TV and the people almost seem kind of superhuman,
Mhm.
or there's no way you don't feel as connected to it. But being able to see it in person, is just it's, like, super entertaining. Like, these guys, you can see the effort, you see the sweat flying off them. They've gotta run to the sideline to wipe their
Yeah.
doused they're drenched in sweat, so they gotta wipe all this off and get back to it. And then, also, there's the sense of understanding kind of the work that goes into it, and behind the scenes as well, I think, for what you're doing, that really you give a respect to it once you see it in person in these matches, so it's super entertaining, but also, like, you realize that you're seeing sport at its highest level.
Yeah.
Yeah, any plans? 2026 is around the corner. You can take a little break, I think, Alex, but then obviously, are you planning to visit other tournaments and continue to learn and grow the tournament from that
Yeah,
aspect?
yeah, that's something, it's funny. Before I ever knew I was gonna run a challenger event, I was in Santiago, Chile, maybe back in like 2018. And there just so happened to be a challenger event there. So I actually look back at pictures I took there sometimes and like sort of like look at the setup and stuff, like, hey, maybe try and borrow an idea. But yeah, absolutely. I think, there's another really great challenger event. It started recently, I think last year or the year before in Sioux Falls, of all places, I think North Dakota. And they supposedly do a really good job. I'm gonna try and go visit that. Maybe I'll try and, go to Lake Como or Saint Tropez, one of those other really, distinct
Yeah.
locations to, maybe do a little bit of research, but also do a little bit of vacationing. We'll see about that.
Yeah.
But also
Well, I
going to
think you
bigger,
should.
bigger tournaments as well. So
Yeah.
I'm probably gonna go to, there's a women's a WTA tournament down in Cleveland, and I happen to be close with, the people that run that. I wanna go down and sort of observe there and see, like, a lot of what it comes down to, to create a better experience for everyone involved. Yeah, you can throw more money at it, but also it's about the systems and the controls that you put in place for certain things. And so really like that's what I'm dialed in on right now is how can I create a better system for the volunteers, for the fans, for the players, for the ATP officials, the everyone involved, like, how can like utilize sort of systems thinking and create better like a better experience in all those categories. And so that's what I'm gonna go to these different tournaments and observe. But then, from a more practical standpoint, we're always trying to raise more sponsorship money so we can invest more in the tournaments, and eventually give back more to the community. So we're gonna try and be getting bigger, better, more substantial sponsors. We have a lot of really amazing sponsors already. People who have committed who come back year after year to help us out and support the event. But you know the the name of the game here is bigger sponsors at higher levels as well. So we're gonna try and work on that. We have a couple sort of prospects, and we've been having some conversations already about next year about a title sponsor or a presenting sponsor. So there's things like that, and then like trying to keep it's funny, it's the tournament's only a week long, and it comes and it goes, and, so trying to, like, find ways through marketing, social media to try and keep the interest a little bit, like, sustain it at a little bit of a higher rate, or get people to anticipate it, get people to look forward to it even more for next year. So there's gonna be things like that that I'm gonna work on in the background when I'm not doing my day job. So yeah, no, I think it's going to be a good year. Looking forward to the next one. We're not totally sure.
July.
Yeah,
You're not sure when the dates will be next year?
yeah, we're not totally sure. That comes down to the ATP Tour schedule, and then also what Cranbrook is willing to say yes to. So we'll see when it is. I would assume the same week next year. It worked out pretty well this year, so yeah, we'll see.
Nice. Nice. Congratulations on the great work you're doing. I think hopefully people listen to this and they realize they don't have, if you're in the Southeast Michigan, Ohio, Great Lakes region, this is a great to travel to. It was $150 or something, $130 for the weekend or $30 a day ish, even cheaper if you buy your tickets ahead of time. So it's something that you could bring the whole family to. Exposure, like you're saying, exposure for young people to professional tennis at this point gets them inspired to pick up the sport and understand the higher levels of this, and that it is achievable for one person or you and your best friend go out there and hit every day, and you could see yourself out there. So I think that's doing great. But also, we've got listeners around the country and around the world, and that go seek out challenger events, go seek out futures events, because you're going to be seeing the same two, if not the same level of tennis that is at Australian Open, Wimbledon, US Open. Yeah, so very cool. I want to thank you for sharing the story. I see growth. You see growth in tennis now. I think there's so many, it's just a different game. It's so much faster, and the guys are more powerful, and women are gaining such an advantage here too, and so much exposure because their game's just as good as the guys. So I think that's a great kind of level set or raising of the tide, helping out every boat in the ocean, encouraging healthy people, encouraging entertained people, and continuing to grow the event is just a work of love, you can tell. So thanks for joining. I look forward to people hearing your story, and then I'll share out all the media links so that people can follow and get ready to go next year.
Awesome. Having me, Dan. This is fun.
Yeah, appreciate it. All right, talk to you soon.
Thanks again to Alex Demuth for sharing the story of Cranbrook Tennis Classic, a tournament that's growing fast, giving back, and bringing world-class tennis to Southeast Michigan. Whether you're in Detroit or halfway around the world, events like this prove that great sport doesn't have to come with sky-high ticket prices or a major stadium. Sometimes the future of tennis starts on courts of a historic school with a vision and a lot of heart. Thanks again to Alex and his family for putting this great event on. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow Event Explorer wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review and share the show with a fellow fan of sport, travel, or storytelling. Until next time, I'm Daniel Roth. Happy exploring.